Hey everyone, welcome back to the Urban EV podcast. I'm your host, Rob Hoffman, and so glad you're here joining us today. If you're passionate about EVs, charging infrastructure, and user experience, then make sure to hit that subscribe button right now. Don't forget you can catch us on your favorite podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube for a more visual experience. If you live in a city, you already know that the EV transition isn't just about cars, it's where they plug in. For the millions of people in multifamily housing like me, charging access is often one of the biggest barriers to going electric. Today, we're joined by someone who's tackling that challenge head on. My guest is Samuel Bordenave, Chief Commercial Officer at SWTCH, a company that's deploying smart EV charging solutions across multifamily housing and commercial parking in dense urban markets. We'll talk about why charging access is an equity issue, the technical hurdles of urban infrastructure, and how collaboration among property owners, utilities, and cities can accelerate adoption. This is going to be a powerful conversation about how EV charging really fits into the future of cities, so let's get into it. Samuel, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Samuel, you've got quite the resume with some serious credentials. So before we dive into EV charging infrastructure, can you give the audience a quick introduction?
Yeah, for sure. So I am originally from France, but I've been in the US for over 10 years now. I started my career in consulting after graduating from an engineering school. And then I got a little bit tired of consulting and wanted to kind of contribute to just one company. So I moved to the US, got an additional degree, and then started working at Tesla in the energy team. And that was the early days of Tesla Energy when the company was just launching its mass product Powerwall, the second version, as well as some large-scale utility power packs. And just did a few different roles at Tesla Energy. Super exciting time. The business was scaling super fast. And I got increasingly interested in EV charging. In the energy team, we were sitting right next to the supercharger team. And so after a little while at Tesla, I decided to join a smaller company that was, fast growing. That's when I joined SWTCH. So SWTCH, we're, an EV charging company that's really focused on solving the challenges of urban charging. So we got started back in 2016 in Toronto, and we're now operating across the US and Canada. We're in more than 300 cities. We've deployed in over 2,000 buildings. Yeah, essentially we provide kind of a full turnkey package of the charger, but also very importantly, the software that handles that charge. And we allow people to deploy chargers in places where without software, without sort of like the intelligence around when to charge, you wouldn't be able to do so, or it would be much more expensive.
All right, so let's open the aperture a little bit right now. So obviously there are millions of urban residents that live in multifamily housing without charging access. And adoption stalls as inequity grows, right? Because, once again, I'm here lobbying for all urban residents right now. You can feel here that things are accelerating everywhere except literally in city centers. So when we talk about equitable EV adoption, what's really at stake if renters and multifamily residents don't have access to charging?
Yeah, you're right. It's, first and foremost, it's an equity issue. If you live in a single family home, it's relatively easy to have a charger installed in your home. You can literally go on, Amazon or go to Costco and buy a charger there. And then, either you can install it yourself or, you use a professional, but it can just be done in the span of a few hours. So very easy to do that in a single family home. But more than a third of the US population lives in multifamily housing, and they don't have their own parking garage. They might either share a parking garage with others, or they might park their car on the street. So it's really interesting if you dig into the data around these two different populations. And folks that live in multifamily buildings and multifamily housing are twice as likely to be low income compared to folks that live in single family homes. And, especially in urban communities, that gap is pretty stark there. And so if you're not able to bring charging to multifamily buildings and to bring charging to these people, then you're really going to prevent them from participating in the EV revolution. And it's really going to be a hindrance for them to get an EV because if they do have an EV, they're they're going to need to find a way to charge it outside of their homes. And we know that that is quite challenging. So it's really about bringing that technology to everyone, regardless of your level of income.
Okay, so this is one of those things where obviously here we're all evangelists for green energy and the EV transition. There is a little bit of a kumbaya sort of thing here where like, well, it'd be wonderful if everyone gets it. I want it in my neighborhood as well. And obviously with lower income, there's even more challenges. Is there a business case for you to go after those lower income properties? Or those unit owners or those renters or whoever is living there, are they driving EVs? Does it make sense?
It is true that the early adopters of EVs are folks that have, a bit more money on average. Until recently, EVs were slightly more expensive than regular cars, and you didn't have a lot of used vehicles. So, you
Yes.
need to buy new, that's more expensive. But I think it's the prices are definitely coming down. You're seeing a lot more used EVs now. Next year, you're going to have a lot of models that are in the 30K range, which was kind of, mind blowing just a few years ago. And then on the other side, folks that might not have a ton of money, they are making rational economic decisions. And today, if you look at the total cost of ownership of an EV, it is lower than the total cost of ownership of a gas vehicle. I think that the best sort of like anecdotal evidence that I can share with you is I often take Ubers or ride-hail apps in the city, and a lot of the times those are electric cars, and I always chat with the driver to ask where they charge their car. And time again, almost 100% of the time, these folks tell me I have to charge at public charging stations because I don't have charging in my building, because either I'm parking on the curb or there's no charging in my parking lot. And they would love to have access to a charging station right next to their building. And it's even a hindrance for their business because when they go to these public stations, it takes time away from doing their business, from running their business. And it's, much more expensive than the electricity at home. So these folks, are a growing population, drivers that are doing ride sharing apps and that own an EV and operate their business with an EV. And that's, just one example of more and more folks using EVs in these sort of like maybe lower income settings that would really love to have access to charging at home.
And I can second your argument exactly. I literally just had a conversation with an Uber driver at a public charger
Right
just
on.
the other day. Had this conversation. It's the exact same thing. He told me the
Yeah.
exact same thing, and it's no surprise. Ironically, though, this is like, and you look 5 years ahead, and obviously this transition is going to take a while, right? We're talking years for everything. Whether it's infrastructure, whether it's the car sales and everything else, we're talking about a 5 to 10 year plan. Although one of the weird sort of counter arguments is that the role of an Uber driver is not going to really exist for that much longer. With Waymo, it's literally moving
Hmm.
into New York City within the next year. You could be sure Tesla's not far behind. Unfortunately, that means the drivers are going to become obsolete. But regardless, whether or not that argument really holds anymore, these people, the inner city dwellers that include me, many of us drive cars. And you're right also that the cost of new cars are coming down. The used market is going to get flooded. They are going to become going to become the norm to have an affordable EV out there. And I think that will speak to a whole lot more people. But then there's the chicken and the egg scenario. So that's once again where you come in. So you have installed thousands of chargers in multifamily and commercial spaces. So what lessons have you learned about the unique needs of the residents compared to suburban owners?
I think what's really interesting is that we see a lot more different use cases in urban settings compared to just a charger at a single family home built unit. And what I mean by that is we're often working with buildings that have that are mixed use. So you might have residents, but you might also have a shopping center in the building. So the building owners who are very often our customers they want a solution that is tailored to their needs and to the different people that are going to be coming to their building. So at Switch, we've put together very sort of refined access controls and policies so that you can really, as a building owner or as a property manager, you can decide what you want to do with your chargers. And so you can, for instance, offer one charging rate for the residents and then maybe a higher charging rates for visitors. Or you can just have the chargers be for the residents and no one else. Or you can do that at certain hours. Maybe during the day it's open for everyone, but at night it's just for the residents. So that flexibility and bringing that to the building owners is really something that we've built over the years because we realized that was really important for them. They don't want to, just have chargers there that they can't control. I think the worst situation for a building owner is you get a bunch of chargers in your building, but maybe it's like really expensive. Maybe there's no support for them, and if they break down, you don't know who to call. And you thought you were doing something great for your residents, but you end up with like a big problem on your hands.
Yeah, and obviously you want to avoid that at all costs. And actually, that's the direction I wanted to go with this conversation right now. I wanted to talk about the technical details and operational challenges. Obviously, so we've got retrofitting, we've got billing, and load management, right? That's another big thing as well, right? I'm sure you run into those problems all the time. So how much does that actually determine whether a project succeeds or fails? Obviously, you have to analyze this for every potential client, right? How do you handle the issue of load management? Because not all buildings are equipped to handle the load that EVs draw.
Yeah, for sure. Great point. Maybe just to like kind of lay the challenge that we're facing in these dense urban settings is very often we do retrofit. So it means we come in, the building is already in existence. Sometimes we work with a developer on a new building and we can sort
That's
of
a lot
size the
simpler.
electrical. But most of the time the buildings have been there. And, the average multifamily and commercial building in the US is around 40 years old. So these buildings were not designed with EV charging in mind. And very often, their electrical room might be, you get in and it's like full of cobwebs and you have these like old electrical panels. And for a property manager, you might think like, well, if I want to add any sort of EV charging there, I'm going to need to do a full retrofit. And sometimes that's what the electrician will tell you. They'll be like, there's no way you're going to be able to add some chargers in your building. We need to like ask for more capacity from the utility. Maybe add a transformer, and all of this can already balloon the cost of deploying chargers to like maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars before you even like added the first charger. So Switch's approach is to really actually look at what's happening in the building. So when we get into a building, we have sensors that are going to be able to tell us actually how much electrical capacity is being used. And when you look at what's happening, very often you realize that, hey, maybe in the evening when people are coming home and they're cooking, they're turning their lights on, at that point, the electrical demand on the building is quite high. But the rest of the time, during the night, or during the day, you're not going to have as much demand. And if you are able to manage the charge of the chargers to sort of meet that peak and not be there when there's a lot of demand for electricity in the building, then all of a sudden, you don't need to add in like an additional transformer. You don't need to do a whole electrical retrofit of your building. So that's at the core of what load management is the idea that if you're smart about when you charge, how at what speed you're charging the cars, depending on the time of day, then you can actually add a lot more chargers. So, for us in a lot of deployments, we end up being able to deploy 10, 15 chargers where before adding load management, you might just have been able to add one or two.
So it sounds like that's your secret sauce, right? So balancing load management is obviously what makes the wheels turn. Is there anything else in your IP that you feel differentiates you from all your other competitors in the market?
Yeah. So we recently launched an update of our software, and our platform is called Switch Cortex. And so it has this advanced load management capability that I mentioned. And another great advantage that we've really spent a lot of time working on is our solution for, communication and internet connectivity. And that is another big challenge that you face when you start trying to deploy chargers in buildings and in parking garages, because very often, you want to deploy them inside the building, maybe even underground. And if you want to have a smart charger, it needs to be connected to the internet. And you need to be connected to the internet so that you can do payments, so that you can, do like the load management that I mentioned, and also so that in the future you can participate in utility demand response programs, which is something we can talk about later on. That's really exciting that we're working on. But lastly, also what's really important is to make sure that you can troubleshoot if the charger has a problem. So at Switch, we have like 24/7 customer support, and we proactively monitor our chargers. So in order to do all of that, you need internet connectivity. But adding a bunch of SIM cards or adding like Wi-Fi routers throughout your underground parking lot, that often often adds a lot of cost to the installation. And so what we've worked on at Switch is a proprietary solution that's based on a mesh network so that you can drastically reduce the need to deploy communications infrastructure within a parking garage. And you can really lower the cost of connectivity. So you still get the benefits of connectivity, but you don't have those costs adding up.
That's huge. That's huge. That I can see how that really could move the needle. Okay, so let's move on right now. I want to talk about, collaboration and just the whole market transformation, because, as we know that just you alone, as a single stakeholder, you can't build a whole, urban charging network alone, right? You need to have partners. And you did recently make an announcement with a fellow Canadian company, Flow, that you have a partnership deal right now,
Right.
which gives your users access to all of their charges. Why don't you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, no, it's a really exciting partnership. Flow, I mean, is a really amazing company, a kind of a sister company of ours. We were both founded in Canada, now operating across North America. And I think what's difficult for an EV driver today is this issue of lack of interoperability. So if it's the sort of perennial joke about like, oh, I need to have like 20 different apps
Yeah.
on my phone in order to have access to all these different charging networks. So how do we as an industry provide a better experience for drivers? And so that starts by doing what we call OCPI integrations. So those are technical integrations that enable drivers from one network that maybe have an app and maybe a wallet with one network to use another charger from a different network, and vice versa. So it's a simple fix, it shouldn't take, it's kind of a no-brainer, right? You enable more access. You have to be, as a company, willing to say like, okay, we're going to be working with other people. Like, yes, we are competitors in a sense, but if everyone benefits, then EV adoption is going to increase, and that's going to be good for our business. And, that's really just the start, because where we want to be in the future is universal plug and charge.
Yeah, of course.
So that's when you pull up to a charging station, you plug your car, and you don't have to do anything. And, it's currently enabled on certain networks. Tesla, for instance, has
Obviously.
had it for a while. Obviously, other folks in the industry are starting to do that. But you still might have an interoperability problem where, if you're a new EV driver, you pull up to a network that you haven't been using in the past, it might still not be possible to do that. And so we're working hard with Flow and with consortiums in the industry that are regrouping both EV charging companies as well as automakers to build the foundation of this universal plug and charge technology. And we've rolled out pilots, and we're really excited about bringing this as fast as we can to our drivers.
It just
Yeah.
makes sense. It seems so simple, right? So you should just partner with every single CPO out there for a plug-in charge experience, but that hasn't happened. You've partnered up with Flow, but how come you haven't partnered with all the other big boys out there?
Yeah, I mean, it's coming. So Flow isn't our only OCPI agreements. We have a few others, probably like between 5 or 10. Our goal is to definitely integrate with everyone. Some folks don't necessarily consider it a priority. We think it's super important for the driver experience. So we're pushing for it, and um,
Is it more of a technical challenge or a marketing challenge? What's the holdup?
yeah, at the heart of it is still a little bit, it's not a technical challenge, but it takes time. It's a combination of you have to have engineers work on the integration, but you also have to get an agreement with another company that might be a direct competitor in the market. So it takes a little bit of time to build that relationship and to then have the engineering teams sit together. Unfortunately, even though in theory the integration is super fast and smooth, in practice, there are always things that pop up when you do that. So for that reason, it's not as simple as a super quick like API connection. We're working to make it that way, but we haven't quite reached that point yet.
Yeah, that would be the dream, right? It seems like it would be a simple API thing, but clearly that's the reason why I've got you on the show to talk about this. I guess it's a lot more complicated when you look underneath the hood.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the industry is still quite young, and I think you can look at other countries that are a little bit more advanced. If you look at what's happening in Europe, for instance, like folks are maybe a few years ahead of us,
Yeah.
and the driving experience there is way better. And it's way more interconnected. You have different players that are all working together, and so I think we're getting there. I think it's really just we're a few years away from that. So if I can ask from your audience to be patient and trust that we're all working super hard to make that happen. Yeah, it's coming, and we're slowly like bringing those barriers down.
Yeah, I think this is one of those cases where all the players in North America need to understand that the rising tide raises all ships. Everyone wins
100%.
when you can all work together, and that one card or no card means a seamless charging experience wherever you pull up,
Yeah.
basically emulating the Tesla experience. So I applaud you for trying to lead the charge here and making some headway here, and I hope you continue along that route. Okay, so I want to take a step back right now because you did mention you had spent quite a few years over at Tesla during a really interesting time. I believe you led the microgrid strategy before joining Switch. So, can you talk to us about the kind of the lessons learned over there, and what did you learn about building energy systems that are both resilient and scalable? I know it's not exactly the same thing, but you must have learned a lot to be there in the salad days of Tesla and deploying those power walls.
Yeah, obviously, it was a great experience and lots of lessons learned. I mean, I think the obvious great thing about Tesla is the focus on making the products amazing and making that user experience central to building the products. So that's definitely something that, for instance, made a Powerwall such a successful product. It looked great. You had this amazing app that was showing you all the energy flows in your home, and you had this amazing backup experience. And all of this like was kind of is still super integrated and packaged in a way that makes you want to have that. You see your neighbor have with a Powerwall, and you're you're like, oh, okay, I want to have that experience as well. And of course, that started with the cars. Like the central idea was making EVs sexy so that people would want to buy them. So I think that focus on a great customer experience and a great product is something that I'm taking along the journey with me, and that I've taken at Switch, where our product team is really focused on that. We've put a lot of effort in making our app seamless, in having a great customer support team from very early on to be there when our customers have questions. It's easy to once you have a product and once you have a customer base, it can be easy to not focus on that and build other products for maybe like new markets or new applications, and maybe a little bit forget or take for granted your initial customers. And that's definitely not something that we're doing at Switch. We're always trying to improve the charging experience, adding new features on our app, adding new ways that you can reserve time to charge for our property managers, new ways that you can set different access controls. And these incremental product improvements are key to making sure that our customer base stays engaged. And at the end of the day, they are, your customer is kind of your salesperson, right? If they're having a great experience with your
The
network,
best salesperson.
they're going to keep coming back. They're going to tell their friends like, "Hey, we got chargers installed in our building. It works really well. You guys should consider this company." So that's really like the sort of motto that we have at Switch.
No, that's wonderful. And I think, once again, your partner Flow, I think they get it as well. I happen to have a public charger down the block that is a Flow charger. So I use them regularly.
Mhm.
It's a very simple product. I love the way on the readout it actually says "s'il vous plaît" when you're plugging
All
in.
right, all right, yeah.
They still haven't changed it to English. I love that actually. I think it's kind of a neat thing that they still have the it still speaks to you in French. But you know what though? It works great. It's seamless. It's a perfect
Mhm.
experience every time. And now on the technology side, I can say, "Hey, these chargers are all full. Notify me when one's available." It's a simple little thing, but they added that recently, and it's wonderful. I use that option all the time, and I have nothing but positive things to say about Flow. And hopefully, I'm one of their salespeople as well because I continue to share the good word. And it's great to hear that you're also following down that road of really focusing on the customer experience. It's something here I talk about all the time. There's so many level 3 chargers out there, the V1s, the V2s out there, which are beyond subpar,
Mhm.
beneath a subpar experience. And that's where EVs charging has gotten such a bad reputation. So I applaud you
Yeah.
for trying to improve that narrative. So Samuel, let's talk about politics right now. Obviously, in North America, at least in the United States, the subsidies are all going out the window. The Trump administration is semi-hostile towards the whole green energy transition. How's that going to affect you? How are you going to handle that?
Yeah, that's definitely a topic that's on everyone's mind. There are folks in the industry that are saying things like, "Oh, it's amazing. Like, it's actually a good thing for the industry to not have these subsidies. It's going to force us to be, to walk on our
Yeah.
two legs."
Self-sufficient. Yes.
Yeah, and I think that there's some truth to that, but they're glossing over the fact that there's going to be a little bit of pain in the short term. I think we're feeling it in the way that we look at our supply chain for chargers. Obviously, tariffs are making it a little bit more expensive to get chargers, but also forcing companies to be more creative about their sourcing. We're working with a lot of companies that are based in Canada and the US to have sort of local chargers produced there, and we've deployed made in America chargers for a lot of our stations. That's one of the things. The other thing is obviously the end of the EV tax credits. I think that's going to have kind of a whiplash effect of, you're seeing a lot of demand right now for
Yeah.
cars, just like right now, like basically until the end of the month. Then you're probably going to see a slump over the next couple of quarters and, cue in the headlines about like, "Oh, EV transition is dead."
Yeah,
Um,
for
and then
sure.
next year, you're going to see, people continuing to buy cars and lots of models that are cheaper, and more affordable, that yes, are maybe, even without the subsidies are going to be a good purchase for drivers. So, I think it's not all gloom. The transition is going to happen. I think the question is how fast it's going to happen, and a slowdown is making things a little bit more difficult for everyone in the industry, because you're not seeing as much of a demand, maybe a little less growth in customers that you were expected. But yeah, it's also an opportunity to look inwards and see how we can be more effective at what we're doing. At Switch, we're spending a lot of time thinking about how can we be more cost effective. What are some levers that we can pull to use some of these new AI tools to provide a better customer experience, and at the same time, be more profitable so that we can reinvest that capital into more deployments.
Sure. I mean, it's all about efficiencies here and, it's in value. I think the price point for everything needs to continue to come down, which comes with scale, but obviously tariffs, that's not working in your favor. The loss of subsidies not working in your favor. What I can say is a positive is very interesting. I just interviewed Scott Case from Recurrent a few weeks ago, and he
Hmm.
had brought up the fact that the tax credits came in January 1st, 2023. And as we know, for leases, there's no income limit there. You get a point of sale discount, $7,500 for everyone that leases. So leases far outperformed purchases over the last 3 years. Now, these leases are all coming to maturity right now. It started 2023. We're entering 2026. So you're going to get a bunch of used EVs dumped on the market. At the same time, simultaneously, the manufacturers are now finally starting to announce, hey, here's a $30,000 viable EV.
Mhm.
That's not just some sort of completely range hindered model that no one wants. Are actually EVs that you could kind of get behind and you want to own. So I think the flooding of the market with affordable EVs is really going to help and motivate, I think, property owners, hopefully, to continue with the transition, so long as, once again, you can offer affordable solutions. So while it would have been nice for the government to help us along for another year or two, and there may be a sort of a regression, I feel like the momentum is working in our favor. And hopefully that's the case. I mean, you
Yeah.
tell me if I mean, I guess you won't know right now. We'll have to reconvene another year or so. But it seems like we're almost there, even if we regress a little bit in the next few quarters.
That's totally the case. Yeah, and I think you pointed on another great topic that maybe we can touch upon, which is this question of affordability, not just at the car level, but also from an electricity cost perspective. We are in this weird time in the U.S. Sort of broader energy industry where, for the first time in maybe like 50 years, there is an increase in a sharp increase in demand for electricity. And that's being driven by
AI,
a little bit EVs, but a lot of it is
it's all
AI
crypto
and
and
data
AI, right?
centers.
That's what's driving it all.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of demand from these like new data centers that are coming online. And unfortunately, what this means is that the average residential customer is sometimes getting the short end of the stick. And we've seen rates for residential customers increase sharply over the past few years. Like,
Especially in California.
yeah, for sure. So, it's, I think over the past 4 years, we've seen like close to like 30% average increase in electricity cost for the average consumer. So that is really a concern for everyone, and especially for utilities that are going to be, they're the ones that are having to have these rates, and it's not going down well with their customers. And the reason I'm saying this is that, EVs are they're a little bit part of the problem in a way because of the increase in demand for electricity, but they also can be a big part in the solution. And that's because a lot of these increases in cost are due to the need to increase the overall electrical infrastructure, add additional capacity, new transformers, increase, DC lines to bring more electricity to centers where there's a lot of demand. All that infrastructure buildup then gets like the cost gets passed down to the customers. What EVs can help with is, they are a battery on wheels, and they can provide flexibility that the grid needs and can be a way to not have to do electrical upgrades. A great example of that is what we just mentioned, right? If you don't have to add additional capacity in your building, if you can still charge cars in a smart way at night, avoiding the peak time demand for electricity, then you're already helping the grid to not be like overscaled. So that's one step. And then the next obvious step is to go to bi-directional technology. And this is
Yeah,
something
I
that,
was going to go there, but you beat me to the
right, you
punch.
saw where I was
Yeah.
going. Yeah. This is something that we're super excited at Switch. We've run a number of projects already to leverage bi-directional technology. And bi-directional technology, for your listeners who are not familiar with that, is the idea that the car can not only charge from the grid, but also discharge its energy into the building and onto the grid if needed. And that is a way for utilities to have access to essentially, yes, like more battery capacity to reduce the demand for electricity on a net basis at certain times of the day. So instead of charging during peak time, you could have the car, discharge a little bit during peak time and then charge back again at night. And that is a tremendous benefit to the utilities and the grid in general, because it means you're not going to need to increase your capacity to meet that peak demand. So there's a number of programs for bidirectional charging that are already existing in California on the East Coast. You have more utilities that are coming up with ways for drivers to participate in those bidirectional programs. And I'm personally really excited about that also because it goes back to my days at Tesla of providing all these distributed batteries on the grid and, putting them to good use. And I think if we do these things like in a smart way with charging companies working together with consumers and with utilities, we're really going to be able to meet the needs of this like affordability crisis and reduce overall need for electrical infrastructure and reduce cost for the end customer.
And, this is also, there's a technology play here. Not all vehicles are V2G, vehicle to grid enabled, but more
Yeah.
and more so are being deployed, on a regular basis. You can be sure within the next 5 years, I would imagine that most, if not all vehicles will be V2G enabled.
Mhm.
Is the tech already built into your chargers?
Yeah. So, great point. Like part of the reason why that tech isn't more ubiquitous is because you have both limitation, or you have had limitations on the car side and also on the charger side. So, up until recently, bidirectional chargers were pretty expensive, but costs are coming down, and we've seen cost of unidirectional regular chargers come down from, um, you know, thousands and thousands of dollars to now, low under $1,000. And the same is happening for bidirectional chargers. We've seen companies like Wallbox, for instance, come out with their new Quasar charger that is bidirectional. So you need to have bidirectional chargers to do that, but there are more options available. Most of the chargers that we deployed today at Switch are still, unidirectional, but we are working. Wallbox is one of our partners, and we're working to bring that bidirectional technology. And then from a software perspective, we've already done a lot of the heavy lifting. So everything that I was telling you about working with automakers and with other players in the industry is also something that we've done from a bidirectional perspective to be ready when more cars have that technology to be able to leverage it.
Yeah, it's all about timing.
Right.
So right now, I want to kind of look into our crystal ball. What's next for urban EV charging? And if we look forward 10 years, what's the single biggest change that you believe city residents will need to know about how they charge their EVs?
I think, where we're headed is, I think, unfortunately, there's going to be a little bit more pain in EV charging before we see the light in urban settings. And I say this because EV adoption is coming, and it's coming, I think, faster than people are anticipating. And the end of the tax credits are not really going to slow it down, in my opinion, because you have all these new models that are coming in like at a much cheaper price tag. So it's coming, and you're going to have a whole new swath of EV drivers that are going to want to charge your car. And the constraints that we're seeing today are, I think, going to increase, where you're going to see increasing lines at public charging stations, lots of people wanting to charge and not enough plugs, basically. And I think the answer to that is, it's not plugs everywhere, but it's kind of it's kind of close to that. At Switch, we like to talk about the cell phone model as opposed to the gas station model, or in conjunction with the gas station model, right? So the gas station model is how ICE vehicles have been operating for a while. You pull up to a station every time you need to fuel up. And the cell phone model is, you don't bring your cell phone to a cell phone charging station every day. What you do is when you're home, you plug it in the evening, maybe next to your bed, and then it's full the next morning. And you don't even have to worry about going somewhere to charge it. And, that's the best experience for drivers, is charging your car where it's already parked. And it can be at home, it can be at your workplace, it can be where you're shopping. It's two really huge benefits. The first is for the drivers. They don't have to worry about where they're going to charge your car. Often it's going to be cheaper because if you're charging at home, you don't have, it's much cheaper than public charging. And then the second great benefit is from a utility perspective and from the grid perspective. Adding a new fast charging station can create a lot of constraints on the grids, and you might have a lot of delays because the utility needs to figure out, can we actually bring all this power to this specific location? And it's even more acute in cities. So I think you have lots of great players out there that are building these urban charging stations, and it's really hard, and they're doing a great job. Companies like Revel, for instance, are really focused on that, and I think that's great, but they're not going to be able to provide enough charging for everyone. And so we're going to need all we're going to need all the other solutions of more like destination and home and office charging to meet that demand. So whether it's a charger at your grocery store, or whether it's curbside charging solutions like the ones of It's Electric, which is one of our partners, you're really going to have to create this sort of like ubiquity of chargers, like ability for people to charge a little bit to do a top up where they're parked, in order to avoid a massive, extremely expensive built out of public fast charging infrastructure.
That is a terrific snapshot and words to live by, and I look forward to your predictions coming true. The roadmap you've presented, it all makes sense, and it sounds like we're getting there. Samuel, I really appreciate you joining us and sharing your insights. How can the listeners at home either find you or Switch Energy?
Yes. Our website is switchenergy.com. I'm based in New York City, so if anyone wants to hang out, they can shoot me a note. My email is samuel.bordenave at switchenergy.com. I think we've gotten a lot of installations done from just residents of building reaching out to us and saying, hey, I have an EV, there's no charging in my parking garage, and maybe the property manager tells me that there's no way we're going to get charging deployed. And from that initial conversation, we've actually been able to talk to the property manager, the building owner, and explain to them what I just mentioned, said on your podcast about how you can intelligently manage the load of the chargers. It's not going to be that expensive. You're going to provide this new amenity for your residents. So we've gotten a lot of deployments done that way. So if listeners are missing a charger in their parking garage, or if they want to talk about curbside charging solutions as well, they should totally reach out.
Wonderful. All right. So that's it for today's episode of the Urban EV Podcast. And once again, a huge thank you to Samuel Bordenave of Switch Energy for joining us and breaking down how multifamily commercial charging infrastructure is the key to unlocking EV adoption in our cities. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, share it with a friend, and even better, leave us a comment. The road to sustainability starts at the plug, and that's why we're here. We will see you all next week with a new episode of the Urban EV Podcast.